It is the midpoint of the Sacramento Kings season. As of recording this, we are 41 games in. Now, this probably won't come out until after the Wizards game. So no, I won't be able to incorporate that DeMar DeRozan 50 bomb against the Wizards in this video. It's coming. I know it's coming. The Wizards, they allow some crazy stat lines. So it's coming. But now is the time where I always look back at the first half of the season and look at the individual performances from each player. Normally in this type of video, I also evaluate the coaching and the entire team as a whole, but I already did that in a separate video talking more about the coaching change that happened. But because I was focused so much on the coaching, I just want to touch a little bit on where the team is at the midpoint, disregarding who's the coach, disregarding being 13-18 under Mike Brown or 8-2 under Doug Christie. It's like we are 21-20. So how does that feel? One game over 500. If you told me at the start of the season that the team was one game over 500 through 41 games, I wouldn't be very happy, I don't think. Like, that doesn't sound great. But that's the thing about an NBA season. It's very up and down. You got to peak at the right times, and the first 41 games have been a roller coaster, but we're very much on the up right now. So after being 13-19 at one point, being 21-20 feels pretty good, because this team showed fight. They were able to fight back from being 6 games under 500 to being right back in the mix in the Western Conference. And that's the thing. You're right in the mix in the Western Conference. You're in the play-in spots right now. You still have a chance at top 4, which is kind of crazy to say, but that is how the Western Conference is. So you go on another streak like you just went on, going 8-2 in your past 10 games, and you're in the playoffs. You're in the top 6. And so you kind of have your destiny in your own hands, and that's always just where you want to be. It's not the perfect spot, but having your destiny in your own hands. West teams are going to play West teams. They're going to win. Some are going to win, some are going to lose. So at the end of the day, if you are able to continue this upward momentum, you're going to make top 6 and make the playoffs. So from that perspective, I'm pretty happy about where the Kings are at in the standings right now. Before the season started, I gave one statistic to watch for each player. And so as I go over each player, I'll talk about that statistic, see if it even mattered at all, see if I picked good statistics. For some players, I definitely didn't. So for some of them, we won't talk too much about that specific statistic, but for some of them, it is important. So the guy that I think we should start with is De'Aaron Fox. Because Fox, for some reason, he's getting way too much hate right now, and I don't know why. I really don't get it. This is a guy that's played 38 games this season, has averaged 26.3 points per game, 6.1 assists, 1.6 steals, 5.2 rebounds, and he's doing that shooting 48% from the field, upping his free throw percentage to 81.2%. He hasn't shot well from 3 this year, shooting 32.8%, although he has been shooting much better lately, but he's been really good from within the arc. And that was actually my statistic to watch coming into the season for him, because last season he had a down year in scoring from within the arc. And it was the year where he took more threes, he upped his 3-point percentage, but he fell off from the mid-range, from finishing around the rim. And this is one of the greatest finishers at the rim at the guard position in the NBA, and greatest finishers period at the rim in the NBA. So it was a little concerning when he dropped off inside, but this season he's gotten back up to where we know he can be. From within 5 feet, he's shooting 68.5% from the field. That's up about 3% from last year. He's also up about 3% from just 2-point range in general from last year. He's at about 55%. So in terms of efficiency, he's not quite where he was 2 years ago. But I also don't think it was realistic to expect him to ever maintain what he did 2 seasons ago, because that was just insane efficiency. And so when a player has this great year, I don't expect every NBA player up until they're 30 to just have a better season every single year. He's dropped off a little in his efficiency, but he's rebounded from last year's pretty poor efficiency inside the arc. And we have to remember that he's doing all of this with an injury to a finger on his dominant hand. So he's playing through that injury. I think the reason that people get frustrated from him is because he does shoot threes, and even myself, I get a little frustrated with some of the attempts. But I think people see a player that can, is the fastest player in the NBA and can get to the rim and get to his spots at will. So when they see him shooting some threes and he's only shooting less than 33%, like, they're not very happy with that. I get that. And so while I do think his three-point attempts should come down a little, we still have to look at his overall efficiency and see that he's been very good, scoring 26 points per game. Just a massive improvement from the free throw line, which has been a big part of the Kings' success. And I'll talk more about the free throw line later. And then you look at the other end of the floor defensively, where following a season where he led the league in steals per game, he continues to be top in all these categories like steals and deflections. And there just have been so many times where he's come up with clutch steals. And I think another reason people get frustrated is because sometimes they see him take these gambles, and when they don't pay off, they look pretty bad. But that's just something you have to live with a guy who's a defensive playmaker, because when they work, and they work quite often, in big moments, there are massive swing points to a game, and you get free points on the other end. He's been so good defensively, leading this team offensively. So I don't think this is the best season of his career, but I think it's probably his second best season of his career. And it feels like people just are hating on him just because he hasn't gotten even better from the unrealistic standards that he set 2 seasons ago when he was incredible in clutch scenarios. He's dropped off in that department. He's turning the ball over, and some of it may be his injury on his hand. So he definitely needs to work on ball control when he's driving into the lane, especially in clutch scenarios, because there have been some bad turnovers, no doubt. But overall, it's still a very good season from De'Aaron Fox. The next player I'll talk about is Domantas Sabonis. And the statistic to watch for him was how many assists that he's getting from DeMar DeRozan, because I was really interested in that relationship, seeing if DeMar could add to getting Sabonis more easy buckets, seeing how that pick and roll developed. And really, the assist numbers are no different from like a Harrison Barnes or a Kevin Huerter. I mean, they're a little up. But so there hasn't been much to talk about from that standpoint. So that's one of those statistics that really didn't do anything. But it really doesn't matter, because the way the Kings have played, they haven't played DeMar and Sabonis together much. That hasn't been the substitution pairing. And so when Sabonis is on the floor, it's more pick and rolls with Monk and Fox than DeMar. But I thought that Sabonis may drop off a little in terms of his scoring per game, just because you are adding DeMar DeRozan. So that's just less shots for Sabonis. But he's stayed around the same points per game and gone up a little, although he's fallen back to earth lately. But right now he's averaging 20.6 points per game, leading the league in rebounding at 14.1, 6.3 assists, and doing that all on insane efficiency, 60% from the field, leading the league in three-point percentage for qualified players, 47.8% from three. And that's really where the unexpected improvement has come from, because we saw him hit some threes last year at a pretty solid rate, attempting 1 a game and hitting 38, 39%, whatever it was. And I just thought that's who he was. I saw other people wanting him to take more threes, and I was like, nah, man, like, this is just who he is, right? Take 1 a game, hit a solid percentage, like, it's fine. And then all of a sudden he's taking 2.5 per game and leading the league in three-point percentage. And so that's really the way that he's made his points per game not drop off, playing with a DeMar DeRozan who's averaging 20 plus points per game, playing with a Malik Monk whose points per game are up, and De'Aaron who's averaging 26. And obviously this team does not have a lot of bench scoring, so they need him to do that. But it's pretty wild how he's been taking a lot more jumpers, not even just from three-point range, but also from the mid-range, and he's been taking those confidently, and his efficiency just hasn't dropped at all. And so I think he's having his best season of his career, and he still might not make the All-Star game. I mean, he should, but he got snubbed last year. He'll probably not make the All-Star game and then make All-NBA again. I bet that's what's going to happen. But not only is he taking more jumpers, it's when he's taking them. He's taking more jumpers in the closing moments of games. In super important moments, the Kings go down 5 with 4 minutes left, and here he is taking a 3 and hitting it to get us back within 2 in a very crucial moment. Like those types of shots that he didn't shoot any threes last season in the clutch. He didn't really shoot any corner threes at all. He didn't look to score in clutch scenarios. I think the Kings should honestly get him more involved in late in games, but the confidence that he has in his jumper is a total game changer. And then not only that, he's also improved from the free throw line. He's 77% this season. Defensively, he's been pretty solid, if unspectacular, but he's been good when the Kings have asked him to trap, to hedge up top. And he's been a good post defender this season. So like I said, I think he's had the best season of his career so far. And then we have the new guy, the new star of this team, DeMar DeRozan. And with DeMar, I feel like he's just come in and done exactly what we expected him to do. Nothing more, nothing less. Like he's just come in and been the exact guy that you paid for. He's just come in, played 36 games, averaged 21.5 points per game. Averaged about 4 assists per game, 1.2 steals, done it efficiently, 48% from the field. Gotten to the free throw line 5.5 times per game and scored 86.5% on those. Has had clutch moments, multiple clutch moments, games where he just takes over. And so he's just done exactly what you've asked him to do. We didn't come in expecting him to be some lockdown defender. Like he's just, not a great defender, but a guy who makes up for it a little through his playmaking defensively, getting steals. And then he's just going to come in. He's not going to shoot 38% from 3. He's going to come in and he's going to give you mid-range buckets. He's going to get to the free throw line and he's going to be good in clutch games. And so my statistic to watch for him coming into the season was how many percentage of his field goals were assisted versus unassisted. And I expected the assisted number to go up, and it has by about 10%. Last season, he was about 34.5% assisted. This season, that's jumped to about 44%. He's been a willing three-point shooter. He's taking corner threes, which I think is important because that just helps the spacing a bit. And so there's a little time towards the end of the Mike Brown era where he went on a very cold streak. And he wasn't like even reaching 10 points in a game. And that had people questioning like, okay, it started okay, but now are we seeing the problems with the fit? But then he's just bounced back with multiple 30+ point games. And so I think he's just come in and added exactly what this team needed in another guy that can just go get you a bucket. And then the next guy to talk about is Malik Monk. And my stat to watch for him coming in was how many clutch minutes he played. Now, I'm not going to go get you the exact minute because that really doesn't mean anything. The point was, is he closing games? And the answer is just yes. He's closing every game. And obviously now he's moved into the starting lineup. He started 20 out of the 33 games he's played. He's closing all those games because I really wondered when you're adding DeMar DeRozan, now are you going to end with Keon Ellis because you want another defensive player? And I do think there's still a time and place for actually ending games with Keon Ellis. Not necessarily over Monk, although it could be, but over a DeMar DeRozan if he's having a bit of an off game, even though you obviously don't want to sit DeMar down at the end of games. But it was just a big question coming in for me. Like, how does this team close games with, are they just going to go with very offensive lineups? And the answer is just yes. And for a while there, it didn't look like the right decision because they were losing clutch games and they were losing it because they couldn't get any stops. But I do think that lineup has improved defensively, although, again, I think there's a time and place where you could slot in a Keon Ellis, a more defensive player. But Malik is so critical, and I honestly want him to be on the ball even more in late game situations because when he's had the ball this season, it just feels so steady. He's averaging 17.5 points per game, 5.5 assists, and those 5.5 assists and only 1.9 turnovers per game. He's averaging 31.5 minutes per game, which is just averaging over 30 minutes per game for Monk. That's new. And so he's another guy who's having a career season, and even on the defensive end. He went through a little slump, I would say, in the middle of the season there defensively, but lately he has been locked in defensively, making important plays, and that's again, super important if he's going to be closing games. He hasn't had his most efficient season. He's only shooting about 34% from three and about 44% from the field. And so I do think at times the shot selection hasn't been there. But he's just been so important to this team, especially in the pick and roll with Sabonis. That two-man game continues to be lethal. And I think he's our steadiest ball handler and best operating out of the pick and roll. And then we move on to the last starter, and that is Keegan Murray. And so with him, it wasn't so much a stat to watch, but just a thing to watch was what position is he kind of playing defensively? What types of players is he guarding? Last season, he was guarding down a lot. He was guarding some point guards or some twos and threes. And you had Harrison Barnes being the guy to guard the LeBrons and the Paolos, and that didn't go well. But now you're replacing Barnes with DeMar. And while I think DeMar could do the exact same thing Barnes did, we're never going to really ask DeMar to, go guard LeBron. No. And so it was kind of a step Keegan needed to take in his progression as a player, that you need to get bigger, you need to get stronger, and you needed to be able to guard bigger players. And so he has guarded the LeBrons, and he has gotten stronger, although I do still think sometimes that's a problem. I don't think he did a great job guarding a LeBron. He struggled against Andrew Wiggins. So I still think he's better when he guards smaller players. He was guarding Tyler Hero super well. But another thing that he needed to do, not just from who he's guarding, he needed to be a force in the paint alongside Sabonis, because he needed to make up for the lack of kind of size that this Kings team has. He's asked to do so much because of this roster not being super balanced. He doesn't really have a backup, so he's asked to do so much, and he has responded. His points are down. He's averaging 12 points per game, but that's not really a worry because you added DeMar DeRozan. But he's averaging 7.3 rebounds per game. He's been a defensive beast. He's been a force on the glass on both ends. And so, his offense has dropped off a bit. And, it's a bit worrying early in the season. But you're asking him to do so much defensively, and his three-point shot has returned. And maybe it's because Keon's getting more minutes, Devin Carter's getting more minutes. He's doing less chasing on the perimeter defensively. So his three-point percentage has gotten back up to 32.4%, when most of the season he was under 30%. I think the one place that is kind of worrying offensively is just his finishing ability, and just sometimes how he doesn't rise up over smaller players in the mid-range, how he doesn't go and put them in the post and he backs it out to the perimeter. I think that's the place he really needs to work on. And I think as he's gotten his confidence back, we have seen more of that. And just last game in the Houston Rockets game, he goes behind the back in transition, switches hands for the finish, and finishes through contact for an and one. Those types of things are very eye-opening. But if he could just get into the mid-range twice per game, get to the rim twice per game, now that maybe he has a little less of a defensive burden on him, and hopefully we trade for a wing that also can put less of a defensive burden on him, then we could see him be able to add a little more to the offense. We don't need a lot. I think we just need a little more from him offensively now. And he does seem to be coming around, and he's done so much to keep this team together. He really is like the glue that keeps this team together. You got all the guards and your scorers. You got Fox, Monk, DeRozan, or even Keon Ellis as a guard. And then you just slap Keegan Murray in the middle, and that connects to Sabonis. So while the offense has been down, I think it's hard to harp on that too much when he's just doing so much defensively for this team. So that was the starting lineup. Now we go to the bench, and it gets a lot worse on the bench because, again, this team is 21-20. So you're like, man, everything's been so positive for a team that's only one game over 500. It's because it falls off pretty quickly here. The Kings have one of the lowest scoring benches in the league, although the first guy off the bench is Keon Ellis, so it'll still be positive there. After Keon, it drops quite a bit to Lyles, and then after Lyles it drops a lot to the next guy. Now for Keon, it's been an odd season because he was just been in and out of the lineup, and I thought he was going to be contesting for that starting spot, and he did start a little bit, and he started 10 games this season. He had, I don't know, was it 2 games as a full-time starter? When I say full-time, the team was healthy and he's starting. They went from Huerter, put Keon in there for 2 games, then went to Monk. But obviously now under Doug Christie, he's playing more. If I would have known that he was going to be in and out of the lineup, then I would have probably said the stat to watch for him was like games played or minutes played. But I thought he was going to get a lot more minutes this season. So my stat to watch was fouls per game, because last season he was 4.1 fouls per 36 minutes. So I thought as a guy that was going to take on a lot more responsibility, he needs to be able to stay on the court as a super important defensive guy for this team. That being said, he has toned down the foul issues, and when given the opportunity has been so important for this team. He's averaging 21.5 minutes per game, 7.5 points per game, 1.4 steals, and 0.7 blocks, and he's doing all of that while shooting almost 43% from the three-point line on 3.6 attempts per game. And this was a team that was struggling knocking down threes, and so early in the season it seemed like Keon and Sabonis were our only consistent three-point shooters, which, those are two interesting guys for that to be. But Keon has shown he's a great shooter. I actually came into the season kind of lowering my expectations a little bit for Keon compared to everyone else, because I was like, he's got to go through a slump here a little bit. It was too good to be true last season. And to start the season, he actually did go through a bit of a slump, like 3 games maybe. And then he immediately broke out of it. And obviously, for some reason, he didn't have Mike Brown's trust, whatever. When he has played, he's been so consistent knocking down the three. We have seen a little bit of a mid-range game. He still isn't really able to get to the rim and create for others a whole ton, but he doesn't need to. He just needs to knock down those threes. And then defensively, he's such a playmaker. The one thing I will say is he comes up with steals so many times, and that means he's leading the break. He needs to get better at finishing the break, either finishing himself or finding the right pass, because it's just the amount of times that he finds himself with the ball in the fast break. He needs to convert some more of those, because he gets so many steals and he finds himself in that position so many times. So many steals, so many deflections. He's asked to guard the other team's best player a lot, and he's also kind of asked to guard up sometimes and act as more of a wing. So now he's kind of fulfilling the role that we all thought he would be playing this season. It just took a little while to get there and a coaching change to get there, but he's now filling that role and filling it very nicely. Then the next guy is Trey Lyles. He had an awful start to the season, came in injured, couldn't knock down his threes, just looked slow out there. It really looked like he didn't play in preseason because he didn't. Then he had another injury, so he was just struggling with injuries early in the season. Once he came back from that, he's played much better and played like we know he can. He's always been a bit of an inconsistent player, especially with the 3-ball, so he's in a bit of a slump now, but that's just what you expect. Since he's come back from that injury, he's done what we've wanted him to do, which is come in, knock down some threes, rebound the ball, be a hustle guy. And he's another guy who's being asked to play some roles that he really probably shouldn't have to play, playing a lot of 5, a lot of small ball 5, guarding guys he shouldn't have to guard. We're putting too much of a load on him as a guy off the bench. Like, he shouldn't have to fill those roles, but he's doing it valiantly. And I think just based off expectations, again, since he's come back from injury, he's playing right at expectations. He's shooting 35% from 3 right now. I bet that'll come up because he's bound to hit another hot streak. He's averaging about 7 points per game, 4.7 rebounds per game, doing that in 20 minutes per game. So he's been solid, inconsistent, but solid. That's kind of what you expect. And my stat to watch coming in for him was free throw percentage, but that wasn't really for him. I wanted an excuse at the time to talk about team free throw percentage, so I'll take that now. He himself is shooting 76.5%, but that's not really a big deal. The team, I think right now, is second in free throw percentage. That may have changed, I'm not sure, but just a few days ago, they were second in free throw percentage. So massive shout out to Fox and Sabonis for both upping their free throw percentages. I actually didn't believe in Fox's early in the season because it just looked a little shaky as his free throws, but he's maintained it. Because before, when you had your top 2 guys in Fox and Sabonis getting to the line a whole bunch, but then not knocking them down, that was just awful for the free throw percentage, leaving so many points on the table. For those 2 to improve, that's huge. For DeMar to come in and get to the line a lot and knock those down, huge. Monk's shooting well from there. So all the important guys that get to the line a lot are shooting well, and that's a huge improvement for this team. But now we move on to some of the more disappointing guys, the bench guys. I mean, Kevin Huerter. Man, I don't want to talk about Kevin Huerter because it's sad. He was so good and so important to this team 2 seasons ago. His relationship to Sabonis, him, Keegan, Harrison Barnes, their relationship to Sabonis in the dribble handoff game was so important to this team's identity. And now the team has kind of had to change its identity because you don't have Harrison Barnes anymore. Huerter can't do what he did 2 seasons ago, and Keegan also isn't knocking down those same percentage of threes. So the team has had to change its identity, which that's not necessarily a bad thing, changing the identity, but Huerter himself has just been so disappointing. I was hoping that he could find a bench role that suits him, but he just hasn't. Some of it defensively isn't on him because he's being asked to guard up and play as a wing, which he just shouldn't. But also when he is guarding players that he should be guarding, it's blow-bys. He's been so poor defensively. I thought at the start of the season he was okay defensively. He was getting a bunch of deflections, a bunch of steals. He was contributing to the team defense. But lately it has been horrendous defense from him. And then add on top of that, shooting 30.9% from 3. My stat coming into the season was, can he get back to shooting well around the rim, shooting well in the mid-range? Because I thought his 3-point percentage will rebound okay, and it's just about, can he get back to scoring in other ways? Well, it doesn't matter if he's not hitting his threes, because he's a 3-point shooter. We need him to come in and hit threes, and he just isn't. And that's that. Now, after those guys, there's really just not a lot of guys with expectations. It's guys on minimums, young players. So we have Alex Len. He's kind of the other guy that's been a rotational player at times, although not lately. And so my stat to watch for him coming to this season was just games played, because the last 3 seasons, towards the end of the season, he earned himself roles as a rotation player. So now coming into this season, it's like we didn't go get another backup big that for sure was going to take his spot. I thought Orlando Robinson might have a shot, but Alex Len comes in and he is playing at the start of the season. And he just hasn't been the same player that he was the past couple of seasons. He hasn't really been able to rebound the ball well. He's fouling a lot. In the past few seasons, he was just great as a screener, roll to the rim, finish around the rim, go down the other end, block some shots, rebound. He has been able to block some shots, but that's about it. He hasn't been rebounding well. He hasn't been catching the ball in the pick and roll. He hasn't been finishing at the rim. His passing has been okay, but when he's a good passer, that's in addition to the other stuff, because there's necessities for his position. So sure, his passing would be a nice add-on if he was doing the necessities, but he's not doing the necessities well. And so it's what do you expect out of a minimum guy? But he has just dropped off in his play. Again, he was never the best backup big, but I thought he was serviceable in the past couple of seasons behind Sabonis, and he hasn't been that this season. And so I think it's just going to require the Kings to go out and look for someone who can play that position, or they're going to have to stick with Trey Lyles. And I can talk about Orlando Robinson next, just because it's the same position, because he's already off the team. I think he's with the Raptors now. For some of these guys at the bottom, the stat to watch didn't really matter. So I won't go over it for all these guys. But Orlando, he showed some interesting things. He was solid in the G League, and when he got time, and especially that first game, he was exciting. I think he knocked down a 3 maybe. He had a couple nice finishes around the rim. He was a rim protector. But the thing was with him is just every time he caught the ball, I wasn't confident he was going to do something. It felt like he was going to turn it over. He was not a safe pair of hands. He didn't get too much opportunity, but in the opportunity he got, the 3-point shot wasn't consistent. And so, it was a fine shot to take for the Kings, and it just didn't work out. Now he goes to a Raptors team that's maybe looking for some center help, so maybe he'll get some time. The next guy I'll just mention quickly is Devin Carter. He just hasn't played a lot. He's played in 7 games. That's just not enough to really say very much. But in his minutes, he's added some good ball pressure on the perimeter. His rebounding definitely pops out. He's a confident player, a confident shooter, but we haven't seen that 3-point shot really go down all that much yet. It's at 26.3%, again on limited volume. Has shown some ability to get to the rim and finish, but for him, it's just, we need to see more. Then we go to Jordan McLaughlin. I was excited about McLaughlin. I thought he might be able to carve out a spot for himself, like a small spot, especially when there would be an injury to Fox, an injury to Monk, when one of those guys would be out, or when the team just felt like it needed a safe pair of hands to run the offense and be a ball handler a little bit more. But he really wasn't that safe pair of hands, and he never really found his way in running the offense. He had one big moment where he hit a clutch three late in a game that he got in, that was a cool moment, but the Kings just have other ball handlers. So if he isn't going to be that safe pair of hands, then there's no point for him to play. And so he's just not playing. The next guy is Colby Jones, and he's played in 23 games. He got his opportunity. And while he maybe looked better than he did last season in his limited opportunities, there just wasn't that much there because he's come in and his three-point shot isn't great, and he's not able to get it off very quickly. He's not a ball handler. He's not a playmaker. And so that means he has to be a very good defender, and he has to be able to rebound the ball and finish around the rim. And he's just been okay on the defensive end. And for him to get minutes, he needs to be way better than okay if he's not going to do much offensively. His finishing at the rim has not been what I hoped it was when the Kings first drafted him. He hasn't been the rebounder that I hoped he would be. Devin Carter seems like that rebounder. Colby has not been that rebounder at the guard position. He had a poor summer league. He's been poor here. He has some big performances in the G League, but there just doesn't seem to be much there when it comes to an NBA player. The next guy is Doug McDermott. Doug McDermott has started 3 games this season, which is pretty funny. He had one solid game against the Raptors where he shot well, but he comes in and he's just a guy who needs to knock down threes. And the Kings will throw him out there when we need some three-point shooting, but he hasn't had very many moments where he has knocked down threes. His three-point percentage is a little deceiving. He's shooting 41.3%, but in the moments where it's actually mattered, the meaningful minutes he's gotten, he hasn't shot well. Those are like garbage time minutes where he's knocking down threes. And he had the one huge garbage time, I think, against the Jazz, where he went 6 for 6. And then I think he missed one at the end. So he's good for a very fun moment there. That was a great moment. And so for just a random minimum guy, maybe that's all you want. You just want a guy to come in and give you a fun moment. And that's great. But he hasn't been able to knock down many shots when he's actually been given minutes. So if he's not going to do that, then, he's not going to play much. But who knows? There may be a game in the future where the Kings are like, man, things are going badly. We need shooting. We have some injuries. Throw him in there, and he knocks down shots. I could totally see that happening. He's just a vet on a minimum. Not too much else to say. Another vet on a minimum, Jae Crowder. He also has started 2 games. So funny how we signed him, immediately started him, and then he didn't play for a month. The Kings just needed anybody with some size and physicality on the wing, just in case Keegan goes down. So that's the only reason he's here. But I don't even think he played in the recent game where Keegan didn't play. So I thought it would be matchup dependent. Maybe he would get a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there. He hasn't even gotten minutes when it seemed like the Kings could have used him. So he's very much break glass in case of emergency type of guy. I believe that's it for all the regular rostered players. So now the two-way guys. Let's just start with Mason Jones. I don't really know what Mason Jones is doing taking up a two-way spot, and I said this before the season. He's 26 years old. He's a great G League player. He just can't really do it in the NBA. He provides great vibes on the bench when he is up with the main team, so I guess that's what he's here for. But it's a little weird that maybe he's taking that spot from a younger player with more potential. But then the other two guys, Isaac Jones has played in 22 games this season, but hasn't gotten much playing time at all lately. When he first came on, he looked amazing. His finishing was so good. He was able to put guys in the post, go to that hook shot. He was rebounding well. He was blocking shots well. And that was my worry for him coming in. In Summer League, he didn't look like the greatest defender. He was athletic, but it felt like he wasn't in the right spots all that much. Those worries are gone. He looked great defensively when he was out there. The three-point shot seems like it's coming along as a guy who just when wide open can hit a corner three. Will he be much more than that? Probably not. But when he gets deep, he can score on a lot of guys. So that helps with some of the spacing issues. And I hope he just gets more of a shot. I think he had a really great start and then trailed off a little bit, but I think he was still pretty good. And I think he was adding positive things. He was making some mistakes, but that's to be expected. I would love to see him get some more time here because I think he's an athletic player that the Kings could really use. Just give him a little bit of opportunity. It can't hurt to see if he could really be a positive contributor right now as just an athletic guy that you can throw out there to defend because you just have no one else that can really do that. but definitely looks like an intriguing player. And then Isaiah Crawford only played in 2 NBA games in garbage time, but in the G League has played very well. And again, is the type of player the Kings need as a wing that can defend. He blocks a ton of shots. He gets steals. Offensively, he can knock down the 3-point shot. And then outside of the 3-point shot, I've liked how he's been able to attack closeouts, get into the lane, use his body, rise up, and finish in the paint for these mid-rangers. I think that's just a nice thing that he's able to do, kind of like what we see from Keon. He doesn't need to be some amazing offensive player, but just being able to knock down the 3 and then having one move you can go to when you attack a closeout as a 3-and-D player is really nice to be able to get into the mid-range. So I think 2 super intriguing 2 ways that we have, and Monte McNair has shown that he's very good at picking out undrafted guys, or guys even in the second round at times, maybe not Colby Jones so much, but in Nimish Queta. But obviously with Keon Ellis, Isaac Jones has looked solid, and Isaiah Crawford has looked solid as well. So that's it for all the players. When you kind of break this roster down, looking at the top 6 players, you give them an A for this season. Looking at the rest, you don't give them an A. I don't know exactly what you give them, but it's been a lot worse. So I really think what that just shows is this team just needs a little bit more around the edges. And the trade deadline's coming up, and the Kings are rumored with guys that make sense to be rumored with, except Kyle Kuzma. Stop being rumored with Kyle Kuzma, please. They're rumored with Cam Johnson. They're rumored with John Collins. These make sense. And it doesn't have to be one of those guys, right? It could be a cheaper player, one that we don't really see coming, a bench guy that is just a backup big, a backup wing. You just need at least one more player that can be somewhat consistent off the bench. Because like Trey Lyles, he's not the most consistent player, but he can still add positive things, and his floor isn't terrible. So he's that kind of somewhat consistent bench player that I'm talking about. Now you need to add one that adds the size and the athleticism. So anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. Let me know what you guys think of the players' individual performances, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.